Alright, my first review of the new year. And I'm gonna say this right out the gate. This review is gonna be spoiler free, but if you're watching this to see Daredevil, don't do that. Yeah, you saw Daredevil in the trailer for this show briefly. That was pretty accurate because he is in this show very briefly. Alright, now that I have let you know that, let's talk about Echo. Echo. That was the sign language for the word, at least that's how someone did it in the show. I could have been doing that completely wrong, I don't know, I'm just going off of what I saw in the show just now, because I just finished watching it. So Echo is the 10th TV season in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the third one in its Phase 5, part of the Multiverse Saga, since I no longer count What If as canon. It's the 22nd installment overall in the Multiverse Saga, and overall in the MCU it's the 45th installment. And worth noting, this is the first installment under the banner of Marvel Spotlight, meaning this is its own isolated story that has nothing to do with whatever else is going on in the MCU. It's shining the spotlight on this character, in this case Maya Lopez aka Echo, who we remember from the show Hawkeye. This 5-episode little miniseries takes place about 5 months after the events of Hawkeye, after Maya Lopez shot Wilson Fisk aka Kingpin in the face. Now Maya Lopez is going after the Kingpin's empire. She goes back to her hometown of Tamaha, Oklahoma, where she confronts her family, her legacy, and her ancestry. Really, we get a deep dive into that world, the world of the Choctaw people, and see what they're gonna do about Wilson Fisk. And now we have our show. A show I thought was pretty cool. I didn't really see anything special that stood out about it, like nothing that really made it unique, but it was still entertaining nonetheless. Alright, Alaqua Cox as Maya Lopez, Echo. I think she's good in the role, and I like the problems that she has to deal with. For those of you who don't know, she's deaf and she's an amputee. She uses a prosthetic leg, which both of those disabilities are also true for the actress Alaqua Cox. But really, her problems are more emotional than that. She has trouble deciding who her real family is, who to trust, because in the Hawkeye show, we saw that her true father was killed by the order of Kingpin, Wilson Fisk, who also helped raise Maya Lopez as his own daughter. Yeah, kind of like a Thanos and Gamora kind of deal. Actually, now that I think about it, that is pretty similar. Wilson Fisk tried to raise Maya Lopez as an assassin, now she's coming after him. So there's antitrust there for Maya Lopez, which made for a pretty interesting emotional character arc for her to go through here. And she does have emotional range. She is in pretty serious stoic mode for most of this miniseries, but you get it, you know, her life is not exactly sunshine and rainbows. She does squeak out some tears during this show, and I thought those were some pretty good moments. But getting into Vincent D'Onofrio returning once again as Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin, still one of the best Marvel villain castings of all time. Like seriously, as far as Marvel villains go, this casting is right up there with Willem Dafoe as Norman Osborn. It's that good. That being said, I wouldn't call this show his shining moment. I mean, there are some pretty big chunks of the show where he's not around. He is the main villain here, but it does take some time for him to really come into play, which again, I do understand. I mean, the show does need to have setup after all. But there wasn't ever really a scene where Kingpin took the spotlight, so to speak. There was never a moment where I was like, whoa, alright, Kingpin in that scene is stealing the show right now. That never really happened. Not here in Echo. You do get the feeling that they're saving his really awesome moments for Daredevil Born Again, even though he is the main villain here in Echo, but it focuses more on his relationship with Maya Lopez, which again, no duh. And their relationship is certainly interesting, and it's done pretty well, it's written pretty well, or at least well enough. But yeah, if you go into the show going, alright, I want to see the return of that Wilson Fisk from the Netflix Daredevil series, you might just walk out of it disappointed, because he didn't really have any awesome Kingpin moments, at least not to me. Nothing really stood out in my mind. As far as other characters go, there was really just one other that stood out to me, and that's Maya Lopez's grandmother Chula, played by Tantu Cardinal, who was in Killers of the Flower Moon. She actually had some pretty good moments in the show. She was a really good supporting character. She had some great moments with Maya, some with other characters. I thought she was a standout here. I want to give this character and the actress all sorts of props. I say that because some of the other supporting characters, I'll be honest, I did not grow to care that much about. A couple of Maya's other friends and relatives. I don't know, maybe the series wasn't long enough for me to care about them. Not sure. Touching on the action scenes though, the action in this show was, again, it was cool, but nothing I really haven't seen before. Echo doesn't really have any superpowers, so for the most part it's just CQC, hand-to-hand combat, and gunfights, shootouts, and let's face it, I've seen John Wick now. None of the action scenes in Echo were filmed as well or choreographed as well as those in John Wick. I know I really shouldn't compare the two, they're two different things, but they're similar in that the combat is the same kind of combat, you know, close quarter combat and melee and gunfights and stuff. So it's just Maya Lopez beating the shit out of guys with shaky cam. There is one scene that is a pretty good long take. That was actually pretty badass. It threw back to Daredevil on Netflix. That was really cool, although there were clearly some points in there where I was like, alright, they definitely cut right there. Although it is made to look like it goes goes on as part of this long take, but it's like the fight's going on and then someone backs up into the camera and then, the fight goes on. I was like, all right there when they backed up into the camera, that's where they cut. Yeah, it was kind of obvious. Other than that though, that long take was still pretty impressive because it went on for like 5 minutes. It was awesome. But then though, still touching on the action, this show is rated TVMA, the very first title from Marvel Studios to have that kind of adult rating. And yeah, sure, this show does get a little violent at some parts, but I wouldn't call this show overly violent. Like, yeah, you saw in the trailer the flashback where Wilson Fisk is beating that guy to a pulp and his hand gets all bloody, or another scene where there's a guy bleeding out and there's blood running down his face. But that's really as bad as the show gets. I'm just saying, as someone who has watched 8 seasons of Game of Thrones, I've seen much worse shit than that. I've seen The Northman, okay? This show, Echo, is like the most mild version of TVMA as it gets. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that's a bad thing. I'm just letting you know, I mean, there is a scene where someone's trying to fix up stitches and I was like, okay, that's kind of gross. I'd rather not see that. But it doesn't stay on that scene for long. And there are no F-bombs. There's no real nudity. It's a mild TVMA for sure. I will say though, changing the subject, I really liked how this show dives into the Native American Choctaw culture. You learn a lot about it in this show. It is a real culture that does exist. You can watch some behind the scenes featurettes that Marvel has on YouTube about it. It's actually pretty interesting. Some of the characters sometimes speak in that native language. The wardrobe is beautiful in this show. Just the costumes, the stitching, and the designs and the colors. Really cool to look at. And from that angle, this series dives into Maya Lopez's ancestry in some ways where I was like, alright, that is the Marvel aspect of it, if I can say it like that without giving away spoilers. There are some things where I was like, I did not see that coming because it wasn't shown in the trailer, but I actually thought it was pretty cool. That actually was the unique thing about the story of Maya Lopez here. It did kind of remind me of that Kahori episode of What If Season 2. Yeah, I know I said I no longer count What If as canon, and I still don't. I didn't even watch all of What If Season 2, but I heard about that episode, so I watched that, and I thought it was pretty cool, so this show kind of reminded me of that in that aspect. Again, trying to be vague, but yeah, it was cool in What If Season 2, and it was cool here in Echo. That vibe of those Native American legends and myths. There are some pretty cool stories there. I say that as someone who has been to Albuquerque a lot and is a huge Kokopelli fan. That's pretty cool. And yeah, I guess word on the street is that this show officially makes those Marvel Netflix shows like Daredevil, Iron Fist, The Defenders, Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, The Punisher, makes them all canon, like official canon in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I guess Kingpin's arc in this show is what does that. Again, I'm not gonna spoil how, but yeah, I guess it does. I mean, I still haven't even watched Daredevil Season 3, but it's not like you have to in order to get what's going on here in Echo. In fact, you don't even need to have watched Hawkeye. No, the first episode does a pretty good job at filling you in on what you need to know before going into the main story. Gotta give it props for that. There were some parts as the show was going along where I did get a little bored, mostly revolving around the supporting characters I didn't really care about, so at least that's just my opinion. The pacing in this series isn't always smooth. And the music, the score was written by Dave Porter, who wrote the music for Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, but for the most part, the score, I hardly even noticed anything special about it. I mean, yeah, sure, of course, there's that Native American chanting, which I thought was pretty cool, but really that was more prominent in the needle drops. I call them needle drops because they are songs with lyrics that play in the show, but they're Native American chanting songs, and I thought those were really cool. Musically, there were some chords in some of those songs where I was like, that sounds awesome. I'd want to listen to those tracks again, but the score, on the other hand, In the end, Echo is unfortunately not as good as I was hoping it would be, especially as the first adult-rated Marvel Studios title. It being that, I wanted it to come out the door swinging, and ultimately it just kind of came through the door like, hey, I'm here. Oh, hi. I guess. I do feel like I'm bagging on the show a lot though. I mean, it is a good show. It's worth watching for sure, especially if you're a Marvel fan, then you've probably binged it all the way through by now like I have. I binged all 5 episodes right when they dropped at 6 p.m. I like the main characters, some of the supporting characters did lose my interest. The action is fun, nothing special, but still entertaining. But I do really like the culture and the world that this small series builds up. That's where it really shines. In atmosphere and tone. It's really good there. I would say that is this show's biggest selling point. It's the world of the Choctaw people, the legends, and the mythos, and how that feeds into Maya Lopez's personal character arc. That was really cool. Embracing your roots and using that as a force to guide you forward in life. Yeah, it's pretty sweet. So ultimately, I would say if you're a Marvel fan, definitely watch this. If you're not, you could take it or leave it. And there you go, that's my final verdict. So Echo. Have you watched this series yet? It's not even that long. Like I said, it's 5 episodes, and they do differ in length, but I'd say the average is like 42 minutes. I think it took me like a little over 4 hours to get through the whole thing. Yeah, not a bad binge at all. So if you have watched it, what are your thoughts on it? If you haven't, are you gonna? Whatever you think, go ahead and leave a comment. And of course, thank you for subscribing. Peace!